Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. On this show, you'll learn how to write and publish a book that grows your impact, income, and business, all from people who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the owner of selfpublishing.com, and a host of another podcast called the 7-Figure Principles Podcast. For free training on how to get your book published, go to spsfreetraining.com. Let's dive in with today's episode. Hey, Chandler Bolt here. And this week on the podcast, we're doing something a little bit different. So welcome to the first ever episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast, where I haven't interviewed anyone. At least it's the first one as far as I know. So this week, what I wanted to do, so as you may or may not know, I'm in the home stretch of preparing for the launch of the second edition of my next book, okay? Or the second edition really of my best-selling book of all time. So a lot of you have probably heard of or read my book Published. So it's published, The Proven Path from Blank Page to Published Author. That's the first edition of this book. It's been downloaded and purchased hundreds of thousands of times over the last few years since it's been published. And so I am on the tail end of releasing the second edition of that book. So this week, I want to give you behind the scenes and go through why am I republishing this book, first and foremost, and why might you want to relaunch one of your books, okay? And then I want to walk through some lessons that I've learned in the process. Okay. And I'm going to go specifically 5 lessons that I've learned on the writing side of things, and then 5 lessons that I've learned on the launch side of things. And then next week, come back next week, it will be the launch week of the book. I'm going to give you a behind the scenes of how I'm launching the book. All right. So I'm going to kind of tie all this together. So the book officially launches on December 14th. If you'd like to support the launch, get a copy for free and be entered to win a MacBook Air. And this is this week only. Go to publishedbook.com/giveaway. Okay. So you can do that right now. Go to publishedbook.com/giveaway. It takes a few minutes to enter to win a MacBook Air. And you can also claim a free physical copy. So I'll actually ship you a copy of this book for free. Go to that link. You can check that out there. All right. So this is the second edition of the book. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. If you're listening on the podcast, obviously you can't, but published, and there's a new subtitle. So it's The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold. All right. It's a totally different cover. It's a red cover, and it's pretty cool. So, but first off, why am I even doing this? So as you may or may not know, the first edition of this book launched way back in 2016. All right. And since then, we've evolved a lot as a company. We've published about 6,000 books at Self-Publishing School. Pretty crazy. And in that process, we've come out with the children's book program, with our children's book school. We've come out with our Fundamentals of Fiction and Story program, our full-time fiction program, our Sell More Books program, our Publicity and Speaking for Authors program. This is like all these additional curriculum, as well as just we've made thousands of improvements to our existing curriculum and multiple major overhauls. So all that to say, our curriculum has gotten way better, and that book stayed the same. And so I went back and I reread it, thinking that I was probably going to do something like this. But I just said, you know what, this can be so much better. This book is good, but really I think it can be a lot better. And maybe you've experienced that. Where you've thought to yourself, man, this book could be better. And I want to relaunch this book, or I want to do an updated and revised version of the book. So that was ultimately why I decided to republish this, is because there's been a lot of copycats copying what we teach and that sort of thing kind of in the space, other books that have come up, all that. So I just wanted to drop the mic once and for all and create the definitive book that people need to read or need to listen to if they're thinking about writing a book. So I wanted this to be the piece where if people don't even decide to work with us at Self-Publishing School, they get this book and it's unbelievably helpful for them. All right. And this can be a referral piece. This will help us grow at Self-Publishing School. I mean, that's the big thing. I believe that books change lives, and writing and publishing a book is one of the best things that you can do to grow your impact, to grow your income, and to grow your business if you have one, right? And so this book has generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales for self-publishing school over the last few years. So I knew that this was going to be one of the best things that I could ever do to help self-publishing school grow. Much less, I wanted to write a better book and help a ton of people through the publishing of that book. So that's ultimately why I decided to do it. And then I also said, I want to prove that this is possible. We tell people, hey, you can go from blank page to published in as little as 90 days if you choose to. And so I said, I want to prove that is possible at the highest level, put myself in the shoes of our students and walk back in that process. I did 6 books in 3.5 years. And I said, it is going to be a long time till I do another book. That was kind of insane. I don't recommend it. But I said, all right, it's time to do this again. And for the 7th book, or really the 2nd edition of my 6th book, however you want to look at it, I said, I want to do this. And so I will have gone end to end. So I put pen to paper, hand to keys on the keyboard on September 1st. And the book is publishing December 14th. So you do the math, September, October, November, and some change. That is amongst a lot of other things going on in business and, all that stuff. So I wanted to prove that it's possible. And amongst a lot of travel, Self-Publishing School is a fast growing company. We've got about 35 full-time employees and all that stuff. And there's a lot of stuff in the works. And so amongst all that you can do it. And because people always say, hey, I don't have time to write a book, or the timing isn't right. And I was telling myself that same thing. And I had to say, hey, I'm going to take a stand for myself, for this book, and for our students. And maybe for people who haven't even become students yet, because they're telling themselves the lie that I don't have time to do this right now. And so that's why I decided to do it, and why I think it's going to be very meaningful for readers and for my business. Now, the goals, I've got some big goals with the relaunch of this book. I want to get to 2,500 reviews on the book by end of January. I think we're at about 1,000 reviews right now. And I want to get 1,000 reviews on the audiobook. So this time, I feel like the first time I did not properly market the audiobook. And as a result, the audiobook hasn't sold as well as it could, and I think should. And so I wanted the audiobook to actually be the primary place that people read this book. Because obviously, books have shifted for a lot of people to audio. And I know that that'll help grow the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know that you guys would probably on this podcast or would probably be more likely to download the audiobook. And so this will just more likely to actually finish the book, like all those things. So I wanted to get I want to get 1,000 reviews on the audiobook and make that a more prominent piece of the promotion strategy. And then ultimately, I want to move a ton of books. I want to have this book be downloaded or sold a million times over the next year. So I want to hit 1 million sales on the book. That's pretty much it. So those are my personal goals for the relaunch. Now, in the book itself, grab a copy. You can get it for free and that giveaway, or you can just grab one on Amazon. But I talk about it's in chapter, I think it's number 20, chapter 21. I talk about the 5 types of relaunches. Okay. Yeah, exactly here. It's on page 168. All right. And so if you're thinking about relaunching your book, I'm not going to go into all the detail, obviously, on this episode, because I'd be here forever. But check out that chapter, it's chapter 21. And I think everyone should relaunch their book, whether you've successfully published like I had the first time, or especially if you had a failed launch. And I tell kind of the story of failed launch Fred and successful launch Sally in this chapter. But that's why I think you should relaunch and the type of relaunch options that you have. All right. So check out chapter 21. But I want to walk you through really 10 lessons that I've learned, 5 on the writing side and 5 on the launch side. Okay. Lesson number 1, and this is on writing, but it's really on the piece as a whole, is plan everything ahead of time. One of the best things I did is I planned out everything. Okay. So I planned out, all right, I got 30, I think, or maybe it's 45 days to write my rough draft. I've got 15 to 20 days to do the editing. I've got about 5 to 10 days to turn around the book formatting. I've got all those things. I just mapped it out. And that was when it got real for me. And I said, oh, shoot, if I want to publish this book before Christmas, I've got to get to work, and I've got to block off some stuff on my calendar. So that's number one, plan everything ahead of time. You'll see in the book itself, I walk through the 8 milestones. Okay, so these are updated and revised 8 milestones to actually getting your book done. All right, and that's the 8 steps you're going to have to take. So plan that out ahead of time. Number 2, the power of daily consistent progress. If you're doing this, especially on a short timeline, you need to block out time every single day. And I walk through this in the book as well. It's like mapping out your rough draft plan. So this is especially important when you're working on the rough draft, but you need to make progress every single day. And so block out 60 minutes, if not 2 hours a day. If you're really trying to get this done in 90 days, you got to make daily consistent progress. And I rolled out the 30-day rough draft challenge in the book. And that's going to be really, really helpful if you're thinking about doing this, especially on a shortened timeline. So that's number 2, make daily consistent progress. Number 3 is, I was reminded, the more writing method, it's actually named the framework now. That was another one of the big goals of the book, was to name frameworks, right? And so the more writing method, it works. I just used it. And anytime I strayed off of it, I would stall out and stop making progress. And I needed to come back to it. And so that's super important. So the more writing method stands for mind map, outline, rough draft, editing. Okay. And using that, the mind map, outline, write. So we talk about mowing down your rough draft 1 chapter at a time. Use that. Right. And anytime I got away from that, I didn't make as much progress as I could have or should have. All right. So number 3, the more writing method works. All right. And then number 4 is that the crisis of meaning is real. Okay. Even for seasoned authors. So I talk about this in the book as well. I've got a whole chapter on it. It's let's see here. It is chapter number 8 about the crisis of meaning, which is when you go through your self-editing phase. And I totally went through this myself. And at the time I was even working on this content. It's like, don't get discouraged. The first time you read your book, you're going to think that it's bad. You're going to think this book sucks. I suck. Why am I even doing this? And even though I knew it was coming, it still hit me. Like there was a good 1 to 2 weeks where I'm like, man, I really thought this was better, but I'm not so sure. Like I think this book, I don't know if this is good enough. I don't know if I'm going to hit my goals. I don't know if I'm going to hit the timeline that I want to hit. Like all of these things. And it just felt like the pressure was just caving in. It was intense. And so that's what I would say is that it's going to happen. And so you got to be prepared for it. But even if you are prepared for it, don't beat yourself up. Know that it's coming and that this too shall pass. All right. So for the crisis of meaning is real, even for seasoned authors. And then number 5. And so this is the last one on the writing. And then I'm going to move into some more stuff on the launch. And then next week on the podcast, I'll give you more of a behind the scenes of how I'm actually launching this book or relaunching this book. Okay. So number 5, when in doubt, do more mind mapping and outlining. And you're going to probably think, Chandler, did you already say this? Kind of, but it's so important that I'm saying it again. So when in doubt, go back to the outline. And so I'll show you, I got a couple here kind of handy. So this is the first edition of Published. I got it all marked up, but you can see here. So I mind mapped all the new content that I wanted to. So if you're on the YouTube channel, you see this. Obviously, if you're listening on the podcast, you can't. It's just a mind map of all the new content. But then I turn that into an outline. And I talk about this, and I think it's chapter number 3 of the book, an actual chapter by chapter outline. But then there was a moment where a lot of the new concepts I wanted to teach around marketing and selling more books, it just got a little bit fuzzy. And so I was kind of going back and forth with it. And I said, hold up, why don't I just go back and just outline this section, just like I teach, but why don't I do it again? And in doing so, it made the whole process way easier, right? So when in doubt, do more mind mapping and outlining. That's number 5. All right, now let's move into launch lessons learned. Okay, so this is lesson number 6, and really the first one for launch is number 1 is build buzz before you launch. All right, this is so important, and you've probably heard me teach about this, but publicly proclaim when you start writing a book. And I've actually I'm going to pull back up the book here, but there's a building buzz checklist in the 2nd edition of this book. And I highly recommend it. It shows you all the pieces of your journey that you can share along the way. Okay, so I'm looking it up right now. It's chapter number 14. All right. And so when you commit to writing a book, when you get your mind map done, when you get your rough draft done, when you get your cover options and you get people to vote on covers, vote on titles, build buzz throughout your journey, share your author journey. And it's a tried and true principle that we teach at self-publishing school. It works. And I just saw people getting engaged, and it's like cheerleaders on the sideline of a marathon. They're cheering me on and they want to be involved. By the time the book launches, they feel like it's their book that's launching. All right. So that's number 6, build buzz before you launch. Number 7, and this is important for a lot of people, I talk about this in the book as well, is the shotgun versus the rifle approach. So many people take the shotgun approach, spray and pray. I'm just going to try everything and hope that something works. Right. Well, the lesson here is you need to stick to 3 to 5 launch strategies, or really marketing strategies. So you got a launch plan. So what type of launch are you doing? And in the book, I talk about the MVP launch, the traditional launch. I'm doing more of a traditional launch. But within that, I'm sticking to 3 to 5 launch strategies. All right. And then I'm going to move into the 1-year launch and consistently market this book for 1 year. But number 7, stick to 3 to 5 launch strategies. All right. Be strategic, pick them, and then execute those strategies. All right. And then number 8. Okay. And this is really the power of hand-to-hand combat and one-on-one outreach. Right. It might be easy to look at me and say, oh man, you've got a team, you've got an assistant, you've got all that stuff. Let me tell you, this morning, I spent an hour and a half replying to messages and going through and commenting on posts where people had voted on book covers and saying, hey, join my launch team. Here's a link to the Facebook group. Here's all that stuff. And I've probably spent 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I don't even know how many hours over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, hand-to-hand combat, just one-on-one. Hey, I want to send you a copy of the book. Hey, who wants to be on my launch team? Replying to people, recording videos, that sort of thing. You will never outgrow this. Okay. And a lot of people, they don't want to do it with their first book because they don't like marketing, or they're scared of rejection. Right. But you need to reach out. People love to help. You just have to make it easier for them. And it doesn't scale. It's not, maybe you might not view it as time efficient, but it works. All right. So that's number 8, 1-to-1 and hand-to-hand combat. You need to do it early and often. All right. Number 9, build evergreen assets. All right. So this is another concept I talk about in the book, is the difference between a one-off promotion and an evergreen asset. Okay. Now, one-off promotions are awesome. So if I do a promotion for my book, that's great. But as much as possible, you need to do promotions that turn into evergreen assets. Now, an evergreen asset, just like an evergreen tree, the leaves stay green year round, right? Well, an evergreen asset continues to work year round for your book. And so you need to focus on building evergreen assets. So I'm doing those ahead of the launch, during launch week, and after launch. I'll keep going. Like I mentioned, as part of the 1-year launch, is building as many evergreen assets as possible. All right. And so whether that's through podcast interviews that I'm doing, which I've got one in about 5 minutes, I'm back to back doing all these podcast interviews. That's a big part of the launch strategy. I'll talk about that next week. But whether it's Amazon ads or anything else, focus on, or even getting as many reviews as possible. I mean, those reviews will be on Amazon and help you sell more books. But no matter what, number 9, focus on building evergreen assets. All right. And then lastly, number 10, and this is a core strategy, self-publishing school. I'll talk about it more next week. And that's just the power of a launch team. I'm already seeing this. I've got about, I think, 100 people on the launch team so far. We opened up the entrance to the launch team on Friday. So it's kind of been just a flurry ever since then. But launch teams work. And they're the single best thing that you need to do to launch your book. And I know for me, I was focused on so many other things. It was like, oh man, I need to do this launch team. And just already seeing the outpouring of support and the reviews flowing in has been pretty unbelievable. Okay, so that's number 10, is just reminded about the power of a launch team. And as soon as I get off of recording this episode, I'm going to go back in and work on the launch team. And so it's one of the most important things that you can do to launch your book. So there you have it. I thought it'd be fun this week, instead of doing an interview, to share the behind the scenes of the book. So if you like this episode, if we would like to see more like this, then definitely let me know. It's a little bit of a new format. I'll obviously do it again next week. So come back next week. I think you'll find this helpful. All right. So a couple of things as we close here. If you'd like to support the book, and really, if you want to get hooked up with some free stuff, or if you want our help publishing your book, there's two things that would probably be best. Okay. Number one, if you want to take a few minutes and support the book, especially if you've read the first edition of the book, all right, go to published book, like I published a book, right? publishedbook.com/giveaway. All right. Once you go to that page, it'll take a few minutes. You can enter to win the giveaway. You can get a free physical copy of the book. So once again, I will ship you a copy of this book. You don't have to pay anything. All right. And then if you take a couple minutes and leave a review and that sort of thing, you'll be entered to win a MacBook Air as well on that. All right. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, gosh, this seems really helpful, I would love your guys' help at Self-Publishing School with my book. Maybe you've been thinking about writing a book. Maybe you've already written one and it's not selling as well as you'd like it to, or you haven't published it yet. Or maybe you're just looking to take that next step with your author career. Well, we'd love to help you with that. All right. So you can go to publishedbook.com/apply. Okay. So publishedbook.com/apply, book a call with my team. All right. We've got limited slots, really always, but especially around the holiday season. So if you're booking around the holidays, book sooner rather than later. And especially if you're thinking next year is the year that I'm going to publish this book, right? Well, then book a call right now, and we'll talk to you about your goals, your challenges. We'll start to put together a plan that you can implement with this book. All right. And we'll help you get started. All right. Now, if you're a fit and if you qualify to work with us, we'll walk through next steps. We can walk you through what it looks like to sign up for Self-Publishing School and to get our help with your book. All right. So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Again, if you'd like to get, be a part of the giveaway, go to publishedbook.com/giveaway. And if you'd like our help with your book, book a call with the team right now at publishedbook.com/apply. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'll see you again next week for a solo episode on the behind the scenes of the book launch. December 10th. That's the launch day. I hope that you'll grab a copy of the book, and I've got more details next week on how you can do that. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you're looking for next steps and help with your book, here are two things that'll be helpful to do right now. Number one, go to spsfreetraining.com. We've got some awesome training right there. It's going to help you get started with your book, write your book, launch your book, publish your book successfully, and use that book to get leads, sales, and referrals for your business. So that's the first thing, spsfreetraining.com. When you register for that training, you'll also get a free copy of my book published. Now, the second thing is if you're serious about this book and you're just ready to get started, book a call with my team at Self-Publishing School at selfpublishingschool.com/apply. Okay, so selfpublishingschool.com/apply. We'll talk with you about your goals for your book, your challenges with your book, next steps. How do you get this thing published? So number one, for free training, go to spsfreetraining.com, or to book a call with the team, go to selfpublishingschool.com/apply. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there are so many podcasts that you could be listening to, so I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this one. Now, I want you to do two things right now. Number one, I don't know if you know this, but we've actually got a YouTube channel with all of the podcast episodes in video form. On that channel, it's the Self-Publishing School YouTube channel, as well as a ton of other helpful videos around writing and publishing a book successfully. So check out the YouTube channel, subscribe to that channel. And then number two, subscribe to the podcast here, so the Self-Publishing School podcast, and leave a review. So do that seriously right now. It's so helpful. It'll make sure you don't miss an episode in the future. So subscribe, leave a review. Seriously, right now. Yep, do it right now. Hey, and I also host the 7-Figure Principles podcast. If you'd like to check that out, great podcast around scaling a company. So whether you're a leader or entrepreneur, you might like that. But thanks again, and I will see you in the next episode.